We are recording on Thursday, March 21st, 2024 at 12:18 p.m. Eastern Time with Amy and John Cullen. John's been on here multiple times before, obviously, and Amy's new to it. And guys, as always, sponsor for the show, American Heart for Gold. Please text Tommy to 65532 or go into the description and use promo code Tommy for, I don't know, I think you can win like 5,000 bucks of silver, which you'll need because we are heading towards World War III and gold hit an all-time high this morning. But that's not what we're talking. Well, we might be talking about it. I guess every topic I do now, it does kind of. I realize now that I have a sponsor that I should, talk about World War III on. It's dawning on me that almost every episode I do does somehow dovetail into World War III. Pandemics, World War III, DARPA, World War III, Delta Force, World War III. So I don't know. Maybe I'm a harbinger of the apocalypse. Um, but Amy, as I told you beforehand, how I never have any show notes and I just make it up as I go. As you can see, that is exactly how I do this. I'm already off the rails talking about World War III. So I'm going to hand it over tactically to John while I post the live link. John, could you please introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm John Cullen. Great to be back on the show with you, Tommy. Thanks for having me back on the show. And I asked Amy, Nurse Amy, if she wouldn't mind joining us for this discussion because she has dug into the supportive material, the documentation, the literature on this other pandemic that we've been talking about on the show. I was on the show with you guys just a couple weeks ago with you and Dr. Dave Collum from Cornell, Dr. Scott Jensen from Minnesota, the former Republican candidate for governor. And we were talking about this other pandemic, this crimson contagion thing, this H7N9 outbreak. And Amy is in the industry. She's not just a nurse. I'll ask Amy to tell you a little bit more about her background, but she's not just a nurse. She's a nurse in this realm, and she has been investigating the supportive material behind this other pandemic. The research that's been going on since not just 2013. It turns out before then. So there's been an outbreak, and Amy, I don't know, sort of like Robin Quivers on the Howard Stern show. She classes up the joint in a big way, right? So that's huge, and she knows what she's talking about. She's a nurse with many, many years of experience. Started nursing at 5 or 6 years old, right? Something like that, right? That's when you became a nurse at 5 or 6 or something like that.
Sure, we'll go with that.
Something like that. So you've got over 30 years of experience. And again, it's not just nursing, it's specific to this realm. So Amy's been investigating the supportive material, the literature, the documents that we find on the internet. And when you look at the body of research, it really does start to tell a story. So I thought it would be helpful for everybody to not just hear my machinations about it, but to hear sort of more specific scientific background about this other pandemic, this avian influenza.
And
So that's why I asked Amy to join us, and Amy is here with us today. So
real,
thank you, Amy.
real quick to interrupt. It's only happened a couple times before, but it looks like the connection is very, very choppy. So we're gonna keep streaming, but just for anyone listening, I'm also just gonna upload a copy of it after. It's only happened a couple times before. I don't know why. There was a snowstorm here last night. Just FYI, if it's choppy and it's coming through all butchered, that's not you're censoring. No, I'm not. I'll upload a copy afterwards. So sorry, Amy.
Oh, what can I say? I like John said, I've been in healthcare for 33 years this January, and worked through this entire event that occurred. As John knows, and some of the people that follow me, I lost my own dad during this. I also had this virus in early March of 2020. And so my dad I lost, though, however, a year later. But there were a lot of things that were adding up, things that I was seeing with my own eyes. And I got on Twitter and John had, I don't remember if John posted something or I posted something. He commented, I commented back, and it was one of those things where he's like, "Do you know who I am?" And I said, "Do you know who I am?" And from there we just started talking, and I was really exploring more into influenza than the whole COVID realm. And then I was looking at the work that John was doing on the Spanish flu, and I had looked at that as a possible option. And I think, I don't remember when, but it was a couple months ago that John and I were DMing back and forth. And I think I said to him, well, I don't remember, John. Did I say something like, well, why do you think he keeps saying 1917? He said always, Trump is always saying 1917. And so we started to dig back into 1917 a little bit more. And that's kind of what I think started all of this.
Yeah, there were a couple of new developments. The 1917 supercut that was put together by, kind of ironically, someone who was making fun of Donald Trump. Right, so they were using it to ridicule him, but he was clearly trying to say something. And it's not just that he was trying to say something, it's the period of time when he was trying to say it. And it was early. So this was March, April, May, and June of 2020. And he keeps saying it again and again. We played that clip when we had Dave and Scott Jensen on the show. And, once you see it, it's irrefutable. I mean, he's clearly saying 1917 Spanish flu, 1917 Spanish flu. And he says it over and over again. And both Amy and I were kind of curious, like, what the hell is he talking about? What is this? Why is he clearly saying something that's not consistent with the common understanding, the common knowledge? And we start exploring it. Now, the other thing that Amy and I both kind of latched onto very early, or about the same period of time, was that the symptoms that we were seeing were based on a quality that the virus appeared to have. This influenza outbreak, again, is what we're talking about, not COVID. That this virus didn't need trypsin. And because it didn't need trypsin, it didn't need an ACE2 receptor. It could just pass through a cell wall pretty much anywhere it wants to go. And this was totally different. What that meant was that this virus could infect other organs. And we saw this with the H1N1, the 1918 pandemic flu. And so that's why, for a long time, I thought that's what it was. And then when Amy started pulling up all this avian stuff, and we saw one of the qualities was that it could infect the organs. In fact, I saw that, I think Bubba's Lamb Chop Shop sent out that, retweeted that, and it was from January 3rd of this year. And you tweeted something about H7N9, and I responded, it sounds like it doesn't need trypsin. And 10 minutes later, 12 minutes later, you came back with another research paper saying, yep, doesn't need trypsin. And it was like, well, that's it then. Both of these viruses have like a skeleton key type capability. And probably for that reason, it was very difficult to differentiate between one and the other in 1917 to 1918. And so it turns out what we've learned together over the course of this exploration over the last couple of months is that the Spanish flu was really two viruses. And that's not me telling you that. That's Jeffrey Taubenberger. Jeffrey Taubenberger is the guy who did the sequencing of the 1918 Spanish flu. So he writes a paper with a whole bunch of other guys and girls saying 1917 looks like it came from this avian strain, and 1918 is this H1N1, that these are different strains of influenza. And I didn't know any of that. And Amy, I don't know. I mean, you've been in this business a long time. Did you know that Spanish flu was two different strains of virus, and that this avian thing was so pathogenic? I had no clue.
No, I didn't have any clue. And to be quite honest, from everything that we've been told all along, 1918, 1918, I never even looked at 1917. And that is where I said it just really opened my eyes. Why is he saying that? And then all the things I have just found that support everything that we're working on and how H7N9 works. There's just a lot of similarities.
Indeed. And we just kept going deeper and deeper. And it reminds me of these stories of people who are accumulating evidence and accumulating evidence and accumulating evidence. And at some point, the evidence becomes overwhelming. And what we found, Tommy, is that there's this exercise called Crimson Contagion. And Crimson Contagion is about an H7N9 outbreak in China. But the United Nations has already told us there's an H7N9 outbreak in China. So it's not like it's a hypothetical, it's actually happening in China. And then we start finding all these Department of Defense documents showing that the Pentagon is involved in this. It's like, why is the Pentagon worried about a respiratory infection in China in chickens? What role are they going to play? Seems odd. And yet, that's what the documentation is showing us, is that Operation Crimson Contagion was run during Azar's management of HHS. This is during the Trump administration. And when Trump takes over, Fauci, remember when Fauci predicts the outbreak? Fauci says, the next administration is definitely going to have a surprise outbreak.
They're going to have one.
Right. So that's the week before the inauguration, right? So Fauci says, one thing's for sure, we're going to have a surprise outbreak. Well, the outbreak's already underway in China. It's like, surprise? What kind of surprise are you talking about? It's already happening. If the Department of Defense is already at report number 47 in February of 2015, that means that, they've been tracking this for almost a year. And so that takes them back to 2014. Novartis already was in clinical trials in 2013 with an inoculation. So this goes back over 10 years. And the first we hear about it in the publication from the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization, which is a sister organization to the WHO. It's not the WHO. This is Food and Agriculture. And they're telling us, yeah, we got a chicken problem in China. But all the artwork is done. Meaning they've got documents and photos and charts and stuff. And that's 2013. So Amy starts coming up with research, and it's like Fouchier and Kawaoka have been working on this stuff since 2011, right? These guys are playing games in, what do they use? Ferrets, right? They're passaging the viruses in ferrets to be able to use the ferret as an intermediary mammal. In other words, getting a virus to jump straight from the chicken into you, Tommy, is a bit of a jump. If I can get the virus to go first to the ferret and then to you as an intermediary mammal, ferrets, I can do gain of function. I can I can churn through 12 generations of ferrets, with my ferret, I got that ferret thing over in the Netherlands at Erasmus, right? So you put the ferrets in the thing, and next thing you know, the ferret's 7 years old in like a week and a half. So it artificially ages the ferret. We go through lots and lots of generations, and next thing you know, we've got a virus that's like 200 times more virulent than the one that they didn't screw with. Now, Yoshi listens to this thing from Craig Venter, right? It's Craig, is that right, Amy?
Yes.
So Craig Venter, you know who he is, Tommy. This is Cold Spring Harbor Laboratories. All right, this is the guy who maps the human genome. All right, so now he's in San Diego, I think in La Jolla, at the Craig Venter Institute. But back in the day, when we were doing the mapping of the human genome, at Cold Spring Harbor Laboratories, it was Craig Venter who was the guy who was kind of the key guy. Well, he gets involved in this in a rather big way. And in a recent video that we were looking at, Amy, he's talking about how the H7N9 outbreak in China was the first time they downloaded a genetic sequence and basically regenerated it using the gene synthesizer. And it basically was like teleportation. He said, because we weren't allowed to ship it. The government wouldn't let the Chinese ship it, and their government wouldn't let us receive it. So they uploaded the genetic sequence, then we downloaded into the gene synthesizer, and we basically teleported the virus. And so he's bragging about that. Am I right, Amy, or did I misunderstand?
No, you're right. And the CDC and BARDA, they played a big part in that as well, facilitating that. But it's I think he called it like a digital biological converter. So and based on that work that they did, and then they eventually got samples. We know that Yoshi had those samples at some point from a patient in China. They did their work to produce vaccines to immunize the chickens in 2017 in China as well. And then from there, you have this massive explosion of mutations. Is it their work from the vaccine? Is it the gain of function? Did they alter something in that, created the mess that they have? But that is what just baffles me about all of this. 2013 through 2017, it's nonstop talk about H7N9. 2018, you see a little bit about it. You hear about it from Yoshi, and then all of a sudden, just dead silence on it. Like it just vanished. Nobody talked about it. I've found numerous links, and the links are no longer valid. You can't get the information. But it just seems so crazy to me that they were just full force with H7N9 everywhere, and then just came to a complete halt just as they're rolling out the Crimson Contagion. And then you have, like I said, in 2019, there was the 7th wave. 2020, there was the 8th wave. And 2021, there was the 9th wave. And I've posted that information that, that's the CDC and whomever sharing that information. And it's just completely being overlooked. You look up anything, it shows, there's no new cases. But then within papers that I've been reading, you can see there's clearly been cases, not just in people. It's still like wildfire through the poultry.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's not gone by
No.
any stretch of the imagination, and it appears to be mutating. And because there's been no test commercially available, it flies under the radar, or it's misdiagnosed as COVID. And so people think they have COVID, and they say, oh, I got sick, I have COVID. Now, I got infected with this for the second time. Let's see, last Monday. And what is it now? It's Thursday. So I've had it now for about 10 days. And I haven't been sick at all, other than a quick norovirus bout, since I returned to the United States, and that was 5 years ago. So I haven't had any influenza or COVID type symptoms at all in 5 years. And then 10 days ago, I thought I had norovirus because my stomach was killing me. Couldn't understand it. 2-3 days later, it still hurt. And that's not like norovirus. Usually you clear norovirus in 24 hours or so, or at least I have in the past. And so I'm still hurting 3 days later, and then the symptoms move. And it becomes very much like a typical influenza, where it's in my lungs, and you guys can probably hear I sound congested. It's in my lungs, and I'm coughing, and I get sinus congestion, and my nose is running, and that kind of thing. So what postnasal drip.
Mm.
So, and then the symptoms start to become much more like a sinus infection. Now, Tommy, you were sick right around the Christmas New Year's period when we know that there was a sort of a flurry of activity of this particular virus. And it's debilitating in that you want to be in bed under the covers. You don't want to go out. You don't want to leave the
For
house.
like a month. It was the sickest I'd been in like a decade.
Right?
Yeah.
So the reason something would make you that sick, where 2 weeks in,
Yeah.
you still don't want to leave the house, right? I mean, your buddies could be calling you up and saying, "Hey, we're doing a big hockey thing. We're down at the pond. The place is amazing. The ice is fast as hell." And you're like, "I'm not leaving, man.
Dude,
you're
I
the
have
blanket."
email evidence of like multiple doctors being like, Tommy, I can't come on. Can we do it next week? I'm sick. And then the next week be like, dude, I'm still sick. And then like the next week be like, I promise I'm not avoiding you. I'm still sick. And I'm like, dude, I get it. I was there too.
All right, so you're a healthy guy. Now you start to look at this virus and you say, "So wait a second, H7. I know you didn't have H7 as a kid, right? You were born right around 1990, 91, 89, right? There was no H7 circulating at that time. So by the time you're 3, 4, 5 years old, that's really when it gets imprinted. Usually, if a kid uh, gets the virus as a child, their first exposure establishes lifelong immunity to that strain primarily. But none of us have been exposed to H7. So if you were exposed to H3N2 as a kid, or H1N1 PDM09, something like that, you would have your primary resistance to that. When this virus comes along, your body is looking at this and going, "What the hell is this? H7? A whole different thing." And it doesn't need trypsin. Now, I don't know if you had any symptoms, Tommy, that were unlike a typical flu. Like, did it move? Did you end up with a kidney infection? I mean, I don't want to get too personal, but did
No,
you
no,
end
no.
up
It
with
was
any other types of symptoms? Did you end up with any migraine headaches?
no, just kind of flu-like symptoms, but it just fatigue, like unending fatigue.
Yeah.
And I'm a routine every morning, gym same time, meditate same time, podcast same time, bed same time. For about 30 days, it was just flu like, couldn't get in bed early enough, couldn't wake up without like coffee in bed. Yeah, it was just 30 days of getting the dog shit kicked out of me.
Yeah. It's a ruthless virus. Well, again, I've got it right now. I'm working it out. I'm not taking anything for it. I'm not going to take any antiviral. And right now, it just feels like I've got a sinus infection. So hopefully, I'll beat this down and clear it. So that's my take on it. It's a nasty virus, though. It has this ability to move through your body. As your body starts to figure out how to deal with it, it just scampers along somewhere else and will infect other parts of you because it can. And I don't know that we've seen viruses before that do this type of thing, that infect people for 3 weeks, 4 weeks, people who are in their early 30s at the prime of their health. I mean, what are you benching now? 275, 265? Come on. You're an animal. I mean, come on. What are you over? Don't tell me you're over 300 pounds on the bench.
No, I don't
What are
do
you
that.
doing?
I do actually. I don't do bench. I do push-ups. I don't like
Oh,
bench. Yeah,
okay.
I
All right.
crank out about 150 now.
150 push-ups. I mean, that's huge. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
huge.
but it is, and then it makes you wonder. Is this meant to be? Is it something that we can't pin because we haven't figured it out yet, or is this itself some sort of test run? Are they seeing what it does? And n equals 8 billion. You have the biggest R&D thing ever. Just as an idea.
So I tend not to get too caught up in the motivations behind this stuff because we're just on the verge of figuring out what the hell it was. And so this is kind of the issue I have is, again, Amy's a professional. Amy's been doing this her whole professional life. And seeing the amount of literature talking about this particular virus and all the concern about it, right up until Azar and Crimson Contagion, at which point it becomes, we're not going to talk about this anymore. Yet, Kaylee McEnany, and to me, this is kind of a mic drop moment, Amy, when you brought these photos to the table of Kaylee McEnany carrying the Crimson Contagion documents. Can I share my screen and show that with it to everybody?
Yeah,
Is that okay?
because they are wild pictures that I had never seen before you, John.
All right, I'm going to share this. You've got to turn on the super security.
Did I not?
Activate. Thank you. Yeah. You did. All right, I got to find it now. All right, so Amy, why don't you tell everybody a little bit about the photos, and I'll see if I can find it, and I'll share it with the audience in a second. But
well, I think the more that we started talking about H7N9 is when I started going back and reviewing, old newspaper articles and magazine stories about H7N9 and came across these photos of her holding these books. And like you said, why is she holding them? She's joining way after this exercise, if you will, is over. She's holding them and continues to show them, display them, and that's what kind of stood out to me. Why is she still holding these? That exercise is over. If anything, you're going to carry whatever the plan is, the action plan, I would think, for the now, not to continue to display this. This is clear after her time of coming in to be the speaker.
all right, so let me be clear with everybody. Let me kind of share with everybody what these dates are and why this is so important. Kaylee McEnany joins the administration in April of 2020. I think she joins April 7th. They announce it on or she joins on the 6th. They announce it on the 7th. She appears for the first time on April 8th. So it's this first week in April of 2020. Nothing in her hand says COVID.
Mm-hmm.
It is wild. Yeah, and then
And
the clarification, unclassified, indicating
right,
that there is
right.
a don't look at version.
Correct. So she's only carrying the unclassified version. Okay. Nothing says COVID. Nothing says COVID. In fact, what does it say? Crimson Contagion. Right, so that's what we see. That's what it says. Now we look at this other thing where these are her notes. These are her handwritten notes, right? So and she's holding this. So those are her fingernails.
Mm-hmm. I think that looks more like Trump's writing, but
well, whatever. But the word COVID isn't in here. There is no word COVID or SARS-CoV-2. It's not part of what they're talking about.
Right.
And yet, nobody seems to want to acknowledge this. And to me, that's almost creepier than the photos themselves. Is the fact that you show it to people, like you show this to all the big shots that are on your show, Tommy, and they don't want to talk about that. Now, why is that? What's the problem?
And I've shared with you that I've talked to the providers. I work at multiple hospitals and have talked to the providers that I work with and said, hey, what do you know about H7N9? And they look at me with this deer in the headlight look, and not one single person there knows anything about H7N9. I end up sharing it with them. Like, how would you know? How would you know to question the PCR? Do you know what the PCR tests for? Do you know what the subtype is? Do you know that it's not even listed on the WHO's website or the CDC, that they're tracking it, looking at it, but yet here's all this data again? It just, which, John, I was going to mention, I can't remember the physician who commented to you. He said, well, if that was the case, pretty much, then why, okay, if it's not in the test, fine, then you won't find it. But we still have all these tests showing positive for COVID. And I remember reading that, and I don't recall that he responded to your response after that. Because I get that question too. Well, if it's not in the test, okay, I can accept that. But then you still have COVID that is popping up on the PCR. And, one thing that, from the clinical side of it is I remember patients coming in, we would do a chest x-ray, we'd do a CT, and the first thing docs say is, oh, yep, that's COVID pneumonia. And I just looked at him like, are you kidding me? You can't tell that that's a COVID pneumonia just by its appearance. And if you look at the appearance of chest x-rays and CTs in comparison to H7N9, guess what? They look the same. They have ground glass opacities in both lobes, lower lobes. It starts typically in the lower lobes. And, I've posted the PCR results where, they say based on, even though it was a negative test, based on clinical signs and symptoms, it's to be counted as a positive test. And I'm just like, you've got to be kidding me.
That's
It
what
didn't matter if
happened
they
to
were
Curtis
positive
Bay.
or negative. Yep.
Yep. So Curtis's wife never tested positive for COVID, but they marked her charts COVID. And from a hospitalist's perspective, that's $116,000 difference. Never tested positive for COVID. But they look at the x-rays. Now, when you start to look at ground glass opacity, hypoxia, cyanosis, all these other presentations, differentiating between an H7N9 infection and a 1918 reconstructed pandemic H1N1 would be very difficult from a presentation perspective without doing either a viral culture or a PCR on both of those strains. But there is no PCR that tests for these two because these are the two BSL-4 strains of influenza now. So we now know that so Amy, the most recent work that they were doing on H7N9 highly pathogenic was done in a BSL-4 laboratory, and that appears to be why the test is only available from the CDC and the WHO directly.
Correct.
Because the contents of that test is considered a BSL-4 pathogen, even though there's only, a microgram or whatever the hell is in there, it's considered a BSL-4 pathogen. So no doctors have this test kit, Tommy. Certainly not where you live. So, tasty lobster and everything, but nobody's going to test for H7N9 within hundreds of miles of you. In fact, I don't know that there's a doctor at Harvard, anywhere in Cambridge, Massachusetts, who has ordered the H7N9 test kits yet.
Or forwarded the sample.
Who's ordering these test kits? Amy, at any of the hospitals you're working at, have any of the doctors shown any awareness that there's now a test kit available for this avian influenza?
No. And, I even went to our labs and I talked to the people who process the PCR tests, and no one knew anything about H7N9. I said, well, how would you know if it was in there, just it's not part of the test? Would would you be able to tell? And they said, no, we have no way of knowing if there's anything other than what it's testing for.
There you go. So again, this isn't the theory, Tommy. We know that we just had the worst avian influenza outbreak in the history of mankind, not just in America, but in Europe, in Australia, in South Africa, in Japan. And not only have we been culling chickens, we've been culling minks. Now, minks aren't a big topic anymore because, Joe Namath isn't playing anymore. But back in the day, when Joe Willie was on the sideline, everybody wanted a mink coat. So minks were being culled, like in Poland and Latvia, and where the hell do they raise them, Amy? Like Lithuania? We're seeing these massive mink culls, and it's like, wait a second. Wasn't Fouchier passaging this thing through ferrets? Isn't ferret just a mink that you don't want to make a coat out of, basically, right? Right. That's all a ferret is a mink you don't want to make a coat out of.
I think I will.
I think that's what that is.
You
I
will
think
know
it's
this podcast
it's-
has succeeded when I start wearing a Joe Namath jacket during shows. You'll know you'll
that's
know
what I'm
it's
saying.
there'll be subtle signs. But yeah,
That's
that's weird. Calling minks as well.
Dude, they're culling
That's
minks by
wild.
the tens of thousands in Poland. It's like, who knew that that's like the mink capital of the world? But again, the literature's there.
Hmm.
So we're killing chicken across Japan. The Japanese don't buy into any of this crap. Like, they don't go along with it just because George Soros said something. The Japanese don't give a shit what
No.
George Soros has to say. And they're killing the chickens.
Hmm.
So when the Japanese are killing the chickens,
Yeah.
something's up with the chickens.
Something's
It's
fucked.
not, yeah, it's not they're trying to, the food supply. It's like people are just so cynical and stupid. It's absurd. There's a global pandemic of avian influenza, and we're trying to hide it because we did gain a function on the strain that's doing it. It's kind of a simple story. So it's again, this isn't like a theory. The part that this is the worst avian influenza outbreak in the history of anywhere. It's like, pick a place. Where do you want to be? It's the worst ever. So if it's the worst ever, I don't know. Worst is kind of worst, right?
Hmm.
So how is this a theory? How and since it's obviously not a theory, how is it that everybody's just pretending like it's not happened?
Hmm.
So Europe, it's the most devastating bird flu outbreak in the history of Europe. It's the deadliest in the history of the United States. But you don't want to talk about it? Why? Why? You don't like chicken?
Well, not
What?
being
What?
publicly talked about, at least. I mean, you can
Well,
rest assured
well,
it's all being talked about in the Pentagon and the equivalent in other nations.
but we just went through 4 years and everybody's yelling at the WHO and everybody's talking about Wuhan Schmoohan. And there's not 4,000 people dead from SARS CoV 2 in Nigeria. In fact, any country that suffered significant COVID deaths simultaneously eradicated influenza. So, in other words, there is no country that we can look at. So, for example, Peru. Peru has 200,000 COVID deaths, but they eradicated influenza. So, are those really COVID deaths or are those influenza deaths? Is there a country that suffered more than 100,000 COVID deaths that didn't simultaneously eradicate influenza? No. No. So was influenza really eradicated? No. Influenza was being hidden. And it was very effective because all the doctors you've had on your show don't realize it was the number one comorbidity of COVID. Yet it's the number one comorbidity of COVID. So when you have, facts that were, I don't think anybody was ignoring it actively, but they certainly weren't paying attention to it. That becomes kind of a problem because if it's the number one comorbidity and it went untreated, in other words, we know the number one comorbidity is influenza and pneumonia, and yet physicians weren't prescribing Zofluza or anything to treat this. So that's a big problem because there's over 500,000 death certificates that list both. So if COVID killed less than 4,000 people in Nigeria, didn't kill 30,000 in Bangladesh. And on this day, by the way, this was the day, Tommy, March 21st, that I published those videos that said there's not 10 people dead in Hong Kong. March 21st of 2020, 4 years ago today, I published a series of videos that said, is it true there's not 10 people dead in Beijing? It's really? There's not 10 people dead in Shanghai? Global pandemic, China pandemic. There's not 10 people dead in Hong Kong, folks, on this day in 2020. And yet, everybody you've had on your show ignores that. That's kind of weird to me. Global pandemic coming out of China. I never heard of Wuhan. And I've been to China. I have a 10-year visa to China. Still never heard of Wuhan. So I looked at Hong Kong. Dr. Bob Malone never heard of Hong Kong, didn't look at Hong Kong, wasn't curious about Hong Kong, didn't check Hong Kong. What's the problem with Hong Kong, Bob? How do you ignore Hong Kong, Bob? I don't get it. And then when you show it to somebody, they block you? Or they ignore you and act like they're 7 years old? I thought we're trying to save people's lives, Tommy.
And that's the other big thing that just baffles me is with your pointing that out to people. If anything, even if they don't want to listen to the H7N9 portion, no one's going, wait a minute, there was only one dead who happened to be a man with end-stage liver cirrhosis and an abdominal tumor. And we are going full on signing a contract for all these vaccines, but we signed with Moderna first. And then what is, I think it was January 28th, John, that link that I put in that showed all of those trials going on with vaccines. You mean to tell me that the WHO, in the middle of what they were calling a pandemic, gathered all that data, put it all in this beautifully tied up in a bow package that quick with one dead? Or how many were dead by January 28th? I don't remember off the top of my head. But even when we signed the contract, there was one, just one, right. And no one's going, wait a minute. And you and Jason have covered this numerous times that, no one thought that was odd. I lose patients all the time from pneumonia and influenza. Nobody has stopped the world and said, hey, we need to have, a lockdown. We need to wear masks. We need to have a new contract for an influenza vaccine. No one's done it. But we have one death.
One guy dead. Mm-hmm. One guy dead in a city I've never heard of in my life. There's 41 cases, period. Mm-hmm. All right. And when I posted that on Twitter, Bob Malone picked on me. He said that's not true. I don't know, what the hell are you talking about? Here's the guy from the WHO saying there's 41 patients and there's one guy dead. And Bob starts telling you, oh, no, I was talking to Callahan. There were plenty of people dead in December. It's like, no, you don't just get to make up a new version of the story where the WHO, in other words, we're going by the WHO. They're declaring the pandemic. They keep the data. They keep track. They keep score. Now, if you want to go to the CDC to keep score, okay, we'll check with the CDC. But Bob doesn't have another database. Like Bob Malone's version is not considered an authoritative source, I'm sorry to say. So when Bob says that Li Wen Liang is a dentist who died in December, I'm going, what the hell is he talking about? He's an ophthalmologist and he died February 6th. So when people refute these findings, that's kind of odd too, Tommy. Really weird. It's like, well, wait, the WHO says there's 41 cases, one guy's dead, and Mike Pence tells us that we just signed a deal with Moderna with one guy dead. What the hell for? What are you, president? You think the president's a moron?
When did
How do you like to? So let's role play this, Tommy. You be the president. I'm going to come to you as the president and say, Mr. President, I'm afraid we've got one Chinese guy dead in Wugu, Wu something. We got a dead guy. I think we need $200 million worth of vaccine, sir. There's one guy dead. Yes, sir. Can you sign here, please? Sign here, please. 200 million. You say, get the hell out of my office. What are you talking about? It's like dead guy in Wugan. Where? What?
my blanket response
Who
would be
gives a who? Yeah, who cares?
when did
Do you know how many people died in Storm Lake, Iowa, of influenza and pneumonia in the last 10 years? Let's take a look at that.
to play devil's advocate, which is what gets me most to hate on the show, is when did y'all or you first point out the disparity of the Moderna contract to the one dead? When did
So
you
the
first point that out?
early December. So it was December 3rd or 4th or 5th. We get on this whole
What year?
3 months ago.
Oh, so the only point I'm making is when Amy said, isn't it odd that no one's pointed this out at the time, which I think is what you were saying. Well, I think it took, I've only become aware of John's work in the last 6 months or so. So if you're
But the
asking, I don't
mapping
know.
stuff.
Yeah,
So the
I'm just
mapping stuff.
okay. I'm just because Amy pointed out, how come no one was raising? It's the same reason why everyone says "rah rah Patriot Act" when the rubble is still smoldering, and it's only until 20 years later that we start looking at it and going, "Wait, that's an abuse of civil liberties." I'm
But
not disagreeing or fighting with either of y'all. It's just how come no one
so
pointed it out? It often takes
and
years in hindsight to point it out.
so there's many aspects here, right? So there's so many different revelations, and each one of the revelations in and of themselves has to be considered and or factored into whatever the hypothesis is that's being brought forward. And the problem is that too many people just ignore evidence, and you can't do that.
Yeah.
In other words, once you realize that the President of the United States is repeatedly saying 1917 Spanish flu, you need a cogent explanation for it. Once you realize influenza has disappeared from over 100 countries by April 15th of 2020, you need a cogent explanation for it. Not what you hear on the Doc Malik podcast, right? So that's where you hear a bunch of morons coming up with explanations for what I wrote as a joke. Okay, I wrote it as a trap because it was ridiculous. And then Martin Neal's going to explain that everybody was really washing their hands and wearing masks, and so we suppressed the fomites in 100 countries. That's why it disappeared in Uruguay. It's unbelievable. So when you hear people talk about this mass formation psychosis, the hypnosis, you're watching it. I'm showing everybody the map. There's not 10 people dead in Shanghai, and 4 years later, Joe Rogan won't touch it.
Well, it's the same idea.
I do. Oh, sorry.
I was going to say it's the same idea. Yuri Bezmenov, right? The KGB defector. After the brainwashing is so complete and so thorough that if you show any evidence to the alternative, they won't believe it. They won't believe you. They won't believe you until you feel the military boot kicking your fat American ass into gulag. But it's true,
amazing.
Right?
It's amazing. I put it on the screen. It's from Johns Hopkins. They won't touch it.
Yeah. Sorry, Amy.
It's amazing. What were we going to say, Amy?
No, I was just going to say, I see what you're saying. And to be fair, yes, because even I didn't find that collection of slides. But when I have approached other physicians on Twitter, no response. I had a physician unfollow me, which is fine. That's totally their right. But to just not look at that and ask why. And if you say any alternative outside of what, COVID, where it's originated from, we're 4 years into this and you're still trying to figure out if it was a lab leak or from the meat market. Come on.
Yeah.
Now it's time to start asking other questions. How did the World Health Organization have all of that data plus everything else so prepared and so perfect, and you had all these trials and you were able to go to all these countries and find out or make calls, whatever, to get that data and put it into this chart. And even without that, John's work showing, wait a minute, we've got how many dead in New York already? I love that slide that you showed, John, that shows New York and China, a couple areas in China, that shows how many we had dead compared to China. And it's like, wait a minute, but the disease, originated here? Wait a minute. And nobody's looking at that. If you go anything outside of that bubble, yes, that slide. I love that slide.
Okay, so important clarification on my end then. I think I misunderstood is, yeah, there's two ways to look at it. It's how come no one raised an eyebrow when we signed a contract with Moderna for one dead versus once it's been a couple of years and the information's presented to you, how come you don't raise an eyebrow? So that's like saying, how come you don't question the Patriot Act on September 12th, 2001?
Mhm.
And it's like, shut up, you terrorist, versus September 11th, 2024. You go, hey, it's been 23 years. We now know they're like, the DHS is hijacking Twitter and Facebook. Maybe we should talk about domestic surveillance. So there's a difference in the two. I apologize. I thought you were talking about how come no one pointed it out the day of, and it's like, well, no. So
there's new information, right?
Gotcha.
So this
now
new
you're saying
stuff.
Years later, looking back now that it's got it
right. But even now, so a lot of what Amy and I started to weave together here was also based on these findings that came from a Chinese researcher, Dayu Zhang, who noted that we found H7N9 genes in the first people that were tested in Wuhan. And Amy and I are looking at this stuff and going, well, that seems kind of relevant if there's an H7N9 outbreak in China.
Mm-hmm.
And how was this just glossed over? Why did you think that the people in Wuhan were dying from pneumonia from SARS-CoV-2 rather than H7N9? And how was that never discussed in any of the literature? So that seemed odd. So again, it's when you start piecing all these things together and you start to say, wait a second, so there's H7N9 genes are in the first patients in Wuhan, and there's an outbreak of this in China, and we're running a crimson contagion exercise about H7N9 in China, which is actually happening, and we had the deadliest outbreak of avian influenza in the history of mankind. And it's the number one comorbidity. And it causes encephalitis lethargica. And sounds a lot like long COVID. Sounds a lot like long COVID to me, but I'm not a professional.
And I like to point out, you and I talked about this on your podcast. Go back and look at the meat plants, all the poultry farms and the meat packing plants, and the amount of COVID cases that they had. They were largely affected. And it makes perfect sense to me, anyways, with what I've looked at, that, oh my gosh, I bet you this is an avian influenza. That's why they were getting sick.
You shared a story a couple weeks ago about how they had pigs floating down the river.
Mm-hmm.
And it was pretty dramatic. And we just had the Tyson pork plant just closed outside of Storm Lake, Iowa. Just a week or so ago, 1,200, 1,300 jobs are gone. They're closing the plant. So it's not just in the poultry, apparently. It appears it may also be in the pork. Mm-hmm. And so if you've got an outbreak that's in the food supply, Tommy, that's the kind of thing that Langley, we got to cover that up. They can't have everybody know that. We got to cover that up. Now, when eggs go to $8 a dozen, $10 a dozen, people stop buying eggs. You kind of self-fulfilling prophecy there. But it's been in the food supply. It's been in the food supply for years. And it's not gone. I have it. At the moment, I haven't. I don't have the highly pathogenic version, thank God, or, I'd be in the hospital suffering from something dramatic. But the low pathogenic version, as you probably had, Tommy, capable of really kicking your butt, man. And again, you're a healthy guy. I'm twice your age, and I've had it for 10 days already. And I don't want to leave the house, man. I don't want to go anywhere.
Yeah, and I'm trying to get, my mom actually recommended I get this person on. Shout out, Mom, for the guest suggestion. Goodranchers.com, formative page for Good Ranchers, blah, blah, blah. The proved use of the mRNA vaccine called Sequivity in hogs starting this past March 5th.
Start over? Whoa, so what? We've got a vaccine.
An mRNA vaccine called
for
Sequivity,
pigs.
Sequivity, in hogs. From
What's
either the articles
that
from March.
company?
It's called
Amy,
Good.
what's that company?
Good
That
Ranchers.
Fetus? What was that? Fetus? What was that company? FOETIS?
Oh gosh.
That we were looking at the vaccines for the salmon.
All right, so sorry.
Yeah,
This didn't start on March 5th. The article's from March 5th. March 5th, 2024.
So they're vaccinating.
Actually, okay, never mind. In 2022, the USDA approved the use of Sequivity. Okay,
so it's
that's 2 years old.
So we got mRNA vaccines in the pigs. They're vaccinating the salmon.
By Merck Animal Health.
Yeah, it actually started back in 2018.
Okay, so I'm way behind you. I'll.
But it's relevant though, because if you go back and you look at the influenza numbers, 2017, 2018, this is about the time they started doing the H7N9 clinical trials for vaccines. Was around 2017. In 2017, we had quite a few. Well, we had a lot of cases of influenza, but we also had a lot of influenza deaths. That's also the year that they started doing the vaccines in the chickens over in China. They did it with a bivalent H5 and N7 H5. Oh goodness, it's the 5 and the 7. They did a mixture of the two together. I've posted information on that. And then, now all of this, we've got, I don't know how many different strains of what going around of avian influenza. And yeah, but the pigs, that's a big one. And I think we talked about that, John, too, even prior to that post I made. I think I asked you in a post, what's it look like? Can swine get avian influenza?
I think so. Again, the Chinese found them floating down the river. They recovered something like 30 or 40 pigs. And they said, that's just the ones we recovered. Like they were floating down the Yangtze.
Mm-hmm.
That's not a good look. So I wouldn't doubt it for a minute that, absolutely. And in fact, we just saw a story in the last 24 hours that now they're saying that we've got avian influenza in a goat.
Mm-hmm.
So, the thing is, Tommy, I think we're going to see they're going to use H5N1 as the distraction, just as they used COVID. They don't want the world to know that a gain-of-function virus that Yoshihiro Kawaoka tweaked, he made 4 little changes to it to make it highly pathogenic. That's all it took.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the virus that is disease X. This is it.
Yeah.
Bill Gates said, I'm worried H7N9 is disease X. Well, it's here.
Like that. I found it.
I mean, it's here. Come on. It's
whatever that motherfucker says, you just write it down.
So he says, I'm worried H7N9 is disease X. I'm telling you, it's been here. We've been tracking it since 2013. For 11 years, they've kept this from the public. COVID was they had to come up with some sort of cover story. And I'm telling you, Trump didn't want to play the COVID card. He didn't want to play. He kept downplaying it. He's like, don't worry. We'll get through this. Don't worry. And these viruses are nasty, man. Kawaoka, I mean, he wins. He wins the crown. This thing is a killer virus. And it's not done. It's mutating, right? So it's still out there and it's dominant. And this is the part I don't understand, Amy, is how one influenza strain ends up dominating over the other strains. You know how we talk about how like an H1N1 PDM09 will push out the H3N2 for a couple seasons or something like that. I don't understand that dynamic. I don't understand how one virus or one strain of a virus pushes out the sister strain, so to speak, and becomes dominant to the extent that we then like don't see a whole lot of H3N2 anywhere. Like it just doesn't show up. But then like 5 years from now, we might see it again. Like, well, where the hell was it? Was it in the, where? Was it in the garage? Was it next to the spare tire? Like where the hell was it? So where was it hiding? So that's the part I don't quite understand, but there's certain dogma that everybody just seems to accept that, one virus becomes the dominant strain, pushes out the others. Okay. It would be nice if you guys tested for that dominant strain, because by not testing for it and not having a color for it, it looked like it disappeared for 2 years. And we know that's kind of ridiculous because I wrote the paper. And I'm good at ridiculous. So there you have it.
I'd love to. I never will be able to, not in a meaningful time frame. I'd love to see the unclassified or the classified versions of the Crimson Contagion. That would be so. I would love that.
Again, Brad Wenstrup of the COVID Select Committee, right? They have this letter that says to the HHS Inspector General, why was Dr. Fauci meeting with the CIA? And you never heard anything about that again.
Yeah.
So the answer is because this is a secret. And we don't tell the American public everything that's going on. We make up stories.
But and the expectation is for China to release their information. Funny how that works, huh?
Yeah, Brad Wenstrup's speech, Tommy, he's talking about China's lying. We all know China's lying. And I go, what the hell are they lying about? They sent you the genetic sequence when there's one guy dead. Was it fake? Well, then what the hell did you use it for? It's like, how are they lying? I don't get the lie. What did they lie about? Did they send you, was it really kitty litter? What was the sequence? Was it cat pee? Was that not SARS-CoV-2 in the sequence they sent us? So what the hell was the lying about? So this is the stuff I just don't quite understand. And I don't understand how all the other physicians and COVID experts ignore the number one comorbidity, the deadliest avian influenza outbreak in the history of mankind. A quarter of the egg-laying chickens on Earth are dead. And the Department of Defense was monitoring H7N9.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not a thing. That's a conspiracy theory. Except that it's documents. Not. Right, except that it's not. So how is it that all these people keep ignoring this? Right? So you may say, all right, it's kind of hard to get my head around. The president signs a deal with Moderna January 13th, and there's one guy dead. What might the contract really be for? Well, how many people are dying from influenza on a weekly basis? 4,000 in the U.S. So as of January 1st, 2020, 4,000 people are dying a week from P&I. And there's one dead guy in China. So has critical thinking left the building? Like, is nobody capable of realizing that maybe we had a bigger problem and that's what Kayleigh McEnany is carrying around with her? Is the bigger problem? And that COVID was the cover-up. COVID was the story. COVID is Stephen Paddock.
Yeah.
Had nothing to do with what actually happened here. Nothing to do with it. It's real. It's a virus, but it didn't kill 4,000 people in Nigeria. So how deadly could it be? It didn't kill 30,000 in Bangladesh. So how deadly could it be? Killed 1.2 million people in America and not 30,000 in Bangladesh. They've got 7 toilets in the whole country. 30,000 people didn't die, but we got 1.2 million dead here, America. Okay. It's a different virus, man. COVID didn't kill 1.2 million Americans. SARS 1 didn't kill 1,000 people on Earth. What was the other one? MERS? MERS didn't kill 1,000 people on Earth. Neither one of those coronaviruses killed 1,000 people. But this one killed 1.2 million Americans? Get the hell out of here. Bullshit.
You just reminded me too. I don't know if Tommy listens to all your podcasts, but we talked about Ian Lipkin, who went 5 years. His contract ended in 2018. He was working with the CCP, specifically through Columbia University, working with MERS and H7N9, and that contract was to end in 2018. Now, I'm still looking for data on that. We probably won't see it or find it if he was working with the CCP. But, again, you sign a 5-year contract with them. You're over there working with them with H7N9, but it's just,
next thing
it's
you know,
not
you're
one thing.
phase 5, right? Phase 6, phase 7, phase 8, phase 9, and it keeps getting more and more pathogenic, and it's all documented. It's all documented. It's not like this is a mystery. It's just once you find the material and you look at it, you're like, holy mackerel, it's all right here. Everything is right here. They weren't hiding it. The Chinese weren't hiding it for sure. All the papers, by the way, the authors are all Chinese. Right? I mean, I would say, 98% of the authors on these things are Chinese. Everything's coming out of China. So Brad Wenstrup says China's lying. The hell are they lying about? Chickens aren't dead. We don't have dead chickens. They look dead to me. Smells like they're dead, Tommy. Smells like dead chickens. Looks like they're dead. Eggs are $8 a dozen. Is that my imagination? I don't know. I think we had a chicken problem, Tommy. And I think when Dr. Fauci saw what was happening in China in 2013, it was too good an opportunity to turn down. He goes to Kawaoka and he says, imagine what we could do with this. Already, it's China's fault. It's underway in China. Imagine if it got really bad. It'd be China's fault, wouldn't it?
I still think that and this is just my own theory based on truly nothing but my own hunch. I still think that they're saving the smoking gun for whatever the fuck the pandemic was. I still think they're saving that for inevitably when China moves on Taiwan, and we're already getting and I know this is kind of immediately going to a 100,000 foot view, but when you have all the European NATO states kind of, standardizing their munitions, we've now normalized for the last 2 years fighting Russia, and now you have Israel and Hamas, and then next will be China and Taiwan. It kind of seems like all the pieces are being set for East versus West, Soviet American Cold War Part 2, if not all out war. I think the cherry on top for the precursor will be we just found and we just released, whatever information they've had since 2019, that it was indeed, whatever we cook it up to say it is. I mean, it won't be the truth, but I think it will be used as the final tip over point to get everyone to choose sides. That's my own theory. I've gone on that on different shows before, and but it always kind of, whether it's bricks or whether it's like armament or whether it's moving aircraft carriers or war games or pandemics, all the pieces kind of seem to be setting in place for we're going to need some final thing to be like, and it was China. That's my own opinion. That's kind of beyond the scope of this
Mm.
episode, but that's what I
Well,
think it is I think whatever the
it
trips,
seems
it'll be
it seems
released.
it seems that Trump wants to share stuff that he's not supposed to share.
Yeah.
So when he
Mhm.
says 1917 Spanish flu, 1917 Spanish flu, I feel like we're playing a game of charades and he's trying to
Yeah.
coach you into saying the right thing by saying it again and again and again. It's like, no, 1917 Spanish flu, come on, Tommy, look at me, 1917 Spanish flu, right? 1917, and you're supposed to blurt out, oh, avian influenza. It's like, no, nobody knows what the hell he's talking about.
Yeah.
Nobody's got a clue what the hell he's talking about until you go read the research paper.
Right.
And once you read what Taubenberger and these guys put together and you start understanding about the goose, and there was a goose from Minnesota, and you're like, what the hell? It's two different things. And
Right.
then you find out about the trypsin, and you go, oh my God, so they look the same. They present the same, but they're different. No wonder nobody knew there were two different things. And it all starts falling into place. And then, just this past week, somebody sends me a clip of him talking about how China sent this dust over here. Like, what dust is he talking about? Dust? Oh, poultry dust is considered a biohazard. Oh, I didn't know that. And he's talking about the dust. Yeah, poultry dust. 1 gram of poultry dust can kill 1 million chickens. 1 gram can kill 1 million chickens. And he's talking about the Chinese sent the dust over here. He's trying to tell us what happened, but he's not allowed to because they keep telling him this is national security, sir. You can't tell people that Kawaoka cooked this thing up and we're killing them, and the chickens are dead. Don't eat the chickens. You can't tell people that.
Which is interesting. You mentioned the dust. When I was looking back in 1917 at Camp Wheeler, and where they built that camp, it actually used to be a swamp-like or a lake or something prior to them. It had dried up, and that is where they built their camp. So imagine if they're stirring up all this dust and everything where all of these birds were and feces and what have you. And that's the first thing I think.
Yeah.
But
And weren't you telling me also that the CDC or the FDA came out to some bird operation early in this when you were working somewhere else? You told us a story about
the
that?
CDC. Yeah, that's when I was working in Delaware. We had several patients being brought in who were working at a poultry farm. I can't say where. If you want to look, you can find it. But they were bringing these patients in who were all popping up with COVID again. And the CDC was actually called into that poultry farm to do an investigation of the cases.
Yeah.
And that was in 2020.
It's very difficult for me to take the leap of faith that the Moderna deal that was done on January 13th of 2020 had anything to do with SARS-CoV-2. There's 41 cases and one guy's dead a day before that. The second guy doesn't die until January 15th. And by the 22nd, there's only 9 dead on Earth. The hell do we need vaccines for? It doesn't add up, Tommy. And it's an incredibly scary proposition that the government would lie to the people and tell everybody, yeah, we're going to give you an inoculation for this thing called COVID. And that's not what it was. And that's what I'm afraid is the real story.
And you have to remember Barney Graham, who was doing the work for the mRNA, who also, remember, I just posted this, I think it was last week or the week before, I found where he was working with them on the H7N9 mRNA vaccine. But nowhere in any of that literature up until, 2 weeks ago did I find that.
Yeah. See, what I'm afraid, Tommy, is that a lot of these so-called, COVID truther types are actually working for the government in the capacity of trying to keep people just tied up looking at COVID minutia, because everything we're talking about here has nothing to do with COVID, nothing to do with SARS-CoV-2 at all. It's about vaccine development, viruses that they've been tracking for years before Peter Daszak first mentioned something's going on in Wuhan, December 30th, 2019. Long before that, we were up to phase something in China, and it was already highly pathogenic and people were dying.
And the PCR for the CDC had an EUA. I think that's, important. Like, why did we have an EUA on a PCR that nobody knows about?
In 2014, and then we pulled it.
Yes.
So, so we had an EUA, Tommy, for a PCR test for H7N9 back in 2014. And then in 2020, they take it off the market. So now you no longer can test for H7N9. President Trump says in one of his things, we had to change things. We had to pull the tests off the market. We had to change things. They didn't want to be able to detect it. And from that point forward, the test kits would never detect H7N9. They will detect SARS-CoV-2 in the slightest appearance, meaning you don't need to have hardly any SARS-CoV-2, and we'll pick that up because it's set to be super sensitive to that particular pathogen. But H7N9 is not even in there, so we'll never pick that up. And we don't chart it. We don't have a color for it. So by not testing for it and not charting it, you pretty much can ensure that it's going to disappear. Right?
I think the real, the more important takeaway from all of this in the past episodes we've done is, just for the listener, is don't trust anyone. Don't use your own critical thinking. If it's 1 + 1 and it looks like 2, then it looks like 2. Whether or not you're agreed with or called a witch for using math, it doesn't matter. Whether it's me, John, Amy, any of the people I interview, any of the shit I say, don't trust anyone, because critical thinking doesn't require trust. It might be convenient. Sometimes your thoughts might align. Sometimes they might not. But don't go in any one camp. Don't identify as this or that. Don't, as my favorite comedian Tim Dillon says about looking through the lens of the world as a Republican or a Democrat. What do they say on Fox? What do they say on CNN? What it really is it's, quote, the shirking of the responsibility of independent thought. Because independent thought is it requires some sort of exercise. It requires some sort of effort, instead of just saying, I'm Republican, so I choose this topic, or I'm a liberal, so I choose that topic. It's what you're doing is you're just saying, I don't have to think. It's, this is my team and I'm with that team. Don't, whether it's politics or whether it's listening to this podcast about a covert poultry pandemic, don't trust anyone. Use your own critical thinking, use your own brain, and it'll set you free in more ways than one. But I would say that's the important takeaway. What COVID truthers, whether they're for or not the government, whether I'm getting a paycheck from the CIA or not, don't trust me. Don't trust anyone. Just use your own critical thinking. That's kind of, I guess, the most meta theme I would say people should take away from this. Use your own critical thinking, and that will allow you also to remove your ego from something when you realize you're wrong. There won't be the, oh, fuck, I don't want to admit I'm wrong. If you're using true critical thinking and your true intent is to just get to the bottom of something, you won't mind going, oh, yeah, no, I was wrong. I was a total jackass. And that comes back to the critical thinking. Don't trust anyone, and also don't attach your ego to it. Just examine it.
These guys are good. You got to understand, you're being deceived.
Military grade psyops. Yeah, you're the best of the best.
Right. It's the
don't
best
feel
in the
bad
game.
if you got duped. You got duped.
Exactly.
It's all right. Michael Jordan crossed you up. Don't fucking cry about it.
That's
Most
exactly
people
right.
did, but get up and try again.
That's exactly right. It's why you can't beat yourself up
No,
over it when you
no.
do realize, holy mackerel, man, this is some kind of cover up. They're the best in the game.
Yeah,
This is all they do
yeah,
is hide shit. It's
yeah,
all they do.
yeah,
So they're very, very good at it. Everybody's still talking about Wuhan and patents and all this crap 4 years later. 4 years later. And we're in 10 people dead in Shanghai. And that's verboten? That's pretty interesting, Tommy. That's pretty interesting. Amy, thanks so much for doing this and coming on the show.
hell yeah! Thank you
No,
so much for
appreciate
coming
it.
on here,
Thanks for
Amy.
having me.
It was
Yeah, thanks
awesome.
for having me.
Yeah, and I think I think I proved to you that, like I said beforehand, I just go off the top of my head for better or worse, wherever it goes. That's the I guess the unique, or at least the authenticity of this podcast. But guys, please go into the description. Please go follow both of them on Twitter. As everyone knows, I'm banned from Twitter and iTunes and Reddit and YouTube and whoever the fuck knows what else I'm banned from platforms I don't even know exist. But they're still on Twitter, so please go follow them. And and yeah, again, so I don't know if the streaming thing messed up or not, so I'll check it, and if it is, I'm gonna upload a copy of it anyway, so it won't matter. It'll all be up there. Um, but yeah, thank you both for coming on here. Thank you so much for time out of your day.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Tommy.
Absolutely, guys. Thank you for watching. Take care, everybody.
Recording
Much love.
stopped.
God bless. Peace. And guys, if you're still listening, please go into the description to American Heart for Gold. Gold is at an all-time high today as of March 21st, 2024. This morning I looked at it. It was $2,225. Please go into the description. Please go buy yourself some gold and or silver using promo code Tommy. It helps out the show. If you like these episodes, if you like that I can have on these two and talk about, a covert pandemic, or whether it's just me shooting the shit with someone about comfort women. That was an episode earlier in the week, or anything in between, any doctor in between, or whatever you like. Or if you just like the language or fuck shit, if you like the authenticity, and it is authentic, whether you like me or not, you don't have to, I don't care whether you like me or not. But if you like the show, there's a reason why it's able to be what it is, and it's because it's not on YouTube, it's not on iTunes, and it doesn't make, also that means there's financial repercussions. The show is not, I'm running a media, it's what Elon Musk said about starting a car company in 2008. He's like, starting a car company is already difficult enough. Most fail, but I started it during a financial crisis. He was like, that was stupidity squared. That's how I feel. It's stupidity squared. My media content, my media product is not on iTunes, and it's not on YouTube. It's not allowed on. Kind of fucking myself there. So, but that's because, I do believe in free speech, and I just generally hate the idea of self-censoring. Um, that all being said, so the show does come at a cost. The show runs on money. Surprise. Um, so if you guys want to help out the show, and I know the reason why I don't mind pitching bullion is I don't feel sleazy. One, because I buy it, but two is you're not really spending money. You spend $2,225 on an ounce of gold, you get $2,225 of gold. You're not buying something and then you're at that money, or you're not buying something like a car that depreciates when you drive it off the lot. It's you buy $100 silver, you get $100 silver. You're not fucking buying anything. You're just transferring money from one form to another. Actually, it's more than that. You're not just transferring it from one form to another. You're transferring it from one form to a form that cannot be hurt by inflation. So, do with that what you will. Oh, yeah, and if you use promo code TIME, you get a chance at winning $5,000 of silver. This right here is 100 ounces. You could absolutely kill someone with it. I think that's about $3,000. So it's roughly two of these. And this is from my own savings. This is not from American Heart for Gold. So I stand by what I say. I've been buying bullion for about 3 years now. It is something I believe in. So yeah. But guys, gotta wrap this one up. I gotta go use the restroom. Shows resume Monday. Today's Thursday. And there'll probably be game streams between now and then. So yeah, thanks for watching, everybody. Much love. Take care. God bless. Peace.